Hello and welcome to Guys Dealings with Feelings. This is a show dedicated to help men find true happiness. We use our experiences as men and the real tools that we have used and continue to use for mental and emotional strength. I'm here with my good friend Jason, who's a licensed therapist of over 18 years and has a strong background in trauma and recovery. My own path has been profoundly shaped by the tragic loss of my son, and we talk about the work it's taken to rebuild life for me. Together, we share what we've learned, the way we've implemented the things that we've learned, in hopes of helping other men find true happiness. If this podcast hits home for you, please like, share, and subscribe. A quick 5-star review helps us reach more men who could be helped by hearing this material. You can find us on Spotify and Apple Podcasts under Guys Dealings with Feelings, and on YouTube and Instagram at I2U Thrive. So welcome to today's show. We're going to be dealing with happiness and personal responsibility. Another way of saying we're going to be tackling what happiness looks like, kind of what we've been fooled into thinking. So welcome back. And today we're going to go into something that's kind of uncomfortable. I think pretty much everything we talk about is uncomfortable for men, but anyway, it's just another one. And it's personal responsibility as it relates to happiness. So before anybody checks out on us, we're not going to talk about pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. This isn't about blame. It's not about pretending life hasn't been hard. Most of us were never taught that happiness is something that we participate in. We were taught to chase it, to wait for the right relationship, the right job, more money, more certainty, fewer problems. The longer we wait for external conditions to change, the more power we quietly are just kind of giving away, we're getting rid of. So over time, that waiting is going to turn into frustration, resentment, or numbness. So today we're going to talk about understanding what we are responsible for, and just as important, what we are not responsible for. Because responsibility isn't about fault, it's about ownership. And the moment you take ownership of your internal world and stop waiting for permission to feel okay, is when you can kind of take over. And I think I heard something, somebody said that the second that we can turn expectation into appreciation is when we can really start turning our worlds around, and how true that statement is. And I think appreciation for all that we have, and it's hard to even do when we find ourselves kind of mired in the things I named, or was it resentment, frustration, numbness. When we get mired in that, it's kind of, oh, well, what the fuck I got to appreciate? I got all these bills and my job sucks and I made all these bad decisions and I've landed myself in this position where I can't, blah, blah, blah. So those scenarios, it's hard to stop and take a look and think, and I'll just fill in mine. How am I supposed to not be frustrated or feel numb? I lost my kid, and it was an accident that I left for work and came home, and he was gone. And how am I supposed to look at the bright side? And it's because it could be worse, A, and B, this is this little journey we're on as a human being. While none of us really know exactly what's happening, it is we all do know that it is a unique experience, and we need to take advantage of this unique experience and enjoy it, learn as much from it as we can. If you want to, even if you want to get spiritual about it, what we could be here training for other missions later, and that's we may have to come back if we drop the ball on this go. And I have I kind of bounced back and forth. Jason and I, before we came on, started recording, we were having a discussion of how our realities are so much more clearly being shaped by these external forces, and now we're pitching AI into the equation, which is going to add further doubt to us. I know in history shows us when Hitler was taking over, or really it's any buddy who's an authoritarian. When they take over, the first thing they do is they enter doubt into the equation. So we cannot decipher, quote unquote, truth from lies, real from not real. And I think as clearly as we now can look back and see what Hitler was doing to kind of get people on board with what he was doing, he was using some mind fuckery. And now we look back on it and see how clearly Well, that's all that's happened to us. We're being taken advantage of, and the past 4 episodes we've dealt with the, and this is really the core to our message. I think is that we've been pushed into this external facing scenario as humans, whereas all the experience is needs to be focused internally. And Jason has done a very good job explaining that to us over the last few episodes, and how we need to focus on that. And it's really what all we're trying to work on here in the training, if you will, that we're putting out, is to teach us to stop chasing these things that we've been conditioned to chase. And we're not going to get necessarily, we don't have to dive deep into why we've been conditioned. It is what it is. We've been conditioned. I have, for sure. And I fight it. And it's something that we have to kind of train ourselves out of. So today we're going to focus that on, what does happiness even look like? How am I responsible for it? What am I responsible for? And what am I not responsible for? So I do that whole lead in to say good morning to Jason.
Hey, man.
What's up, brother?
What's up, man?
So let's jump right into, um, and this is something I think you're good at articulating for us. And its responsibility is not the same as blame. Blame keeps us stuck in the past. Responsibility puts us back in the driver's seat. And we don't choose what happens to us, but we choose how we respond to it and how we deal with it moving forward. And I know that's something that you've, the blame thing is big. Like, not beating ourselves up. Um, that for a long time, I think there was a submersive or immersive therapy where we put ourselves back in scenarios and try to work through them and all that. Could you walk us through, why there was some good stuff that went with that type of therapy, but what's a healthier way to do this? And I know once we're trained up, if you will, we're to experience things as they come, and that way they don't build up on us. But as one is navigating into this world of trying to get back internal and stop the constant pull to be externally focused, how can we keep from we accept responsibility, but we don't really blame ourselves for what we've done. Instead, we're just trying to take back over.
Mm. Yeah, man, well, this is kind of this is the first thing that came up. How do you talk about these concepts, right? Um, so for most of my life, if somebody would have asked me about life, right, I would have referred to things that were external to me, right?
What job I
Finances,
have? Yeah, what job I have?
job,
Yeah, yeah.
uh, that's how I've sort of related to life, right? And what we're describing is the movement to begin describing life as my own thoughts about it, feelings, and primarily back to a relationship with my body, right? And because of our being taught to focus on external things, right? We're not really in a deep relationship with those things, our thoughts and feelings, right? So that's really what we're talking about. So I didn't know that that's where life was to be found in me, right? So so that's what I'm responsible for, is getting to know that,
And can
getting
you
to know my interiority, these thoughts and feelings and beliefs and things I've been taught and experiences that haven't been processed. And
how far down that path should we go? For example, why beliefs that I have, or
ah,
conflicting
I got you.
conflicting morals or guides. How do I
It's a
get to
good
that
question.
without diving into, I got the shit beat out of me as a child, or I was,
Yeah.
going back through the horrors that may have us where we are currently are. but at the same time, uh, uh, learning to own, I think this is the best way I've learned to say it, learning to own my feelings and emotions. And at first, when I heard that, I was like, well, that's fucked up. If I could own it, I'd just be happy all the time. And now that I've learned more, I've learned how and why I feel the way I feel. And that gives me some ownership of it. It's not that I necessarily, I do have a lot more control now, but it allows me to say, oh, I have this uneasy feeling inside of me. And now I'm able, but how do I keep, I don't know that I went through it the healthiest way when I went through my journey. So
Sure,
what's a
sure.
healthy way to dive into that without living in the death of your son or living in an abusive situation, et cetera?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think there are a lot of healthy approaches, um, but let me it's such a complicated question, really, uh, because the thing that what I'm working to help people understand and what I'm working to help understand in my own life, right, is how is the past operating now, right? Wha How is what I went through affecting my experience now, right? And I think we can maybe even use the title of the podcast, right? You mentioned the word happiness. Okay. Now here's my relationship with that word. It is very limiting. I don't know why I was given it in such a weird way and there was so much focus on it. I don't know. I'm not sure. But the way that I used to relate to it, sort of like the end of seeking something, like kind of like relief. So I understand now how limiting that word is and how much it represents programming and what we've been taught, right? Because I'm interested in other words, and I didn't know this actually, but freedom, boundaries, fearlessness, courage, authenticity, un free sexual desire, expression with my partner. No hangups there.
Hmm.
You
Well, I
see
think
what
all
I
that,
mean?
yeah, and I think I get I understand the point, but I think all those things I would put under I would compile under that is happiness, like because you have so much freedom or and you have so much comfort with self, and and really I think what it is we're learning responsibility over feelings, our feelings, period, ownership of feelings, understanding of feelings, emotional regulation. I mean, these are the things that we're really dealing with. It's I try to stay as far away from like buzzwords as possible because I don't want to scare people off. And there's a lot of preaching that occurs and a lot of misunderstanding that occurs that go with some things that are good practices, but they're scary to people because they don't like the person who they learned it from, or they see people who do that and think, ooh, I don't want to be like that person, but they don't understand the freeing nature that comes with some of the things, like meditation. Some people hear the word meditation and they think woo woo, they think uh, tree huggers, hippies, they're not. It's just a misconception, a label that goes with all the other labels that we're throwing out there. And so I don't want to run people off because of words. And, like you're just talking about now, we've also got to be careful with our language.
It's
Um,
important, yeah. Yeah.
because you ask some people what is happiness, and they say, I've got a house and a car and a partner and healthy kids, and that's great. And that kind of goes into the next session, but that's outsourcing our happiness, and it really keeps us.
Well, it's
How?
describing the external, if you see what I mean. There's
Yep.
nothing there's that's not to judge any of that, not to judge abundance or anything. It's just the description is out here. So if somebody said, "I have healthy relationships that make me feel fulfilled," and, I mean, see what I there
Security,
there would
comfort.
be
Yeah.
in well, yeah, that would be
A home that
more.
provides security. Yeah, that'd
Yeah,
be
that
yeah, yeah,
would
yeah.
be, you could say, just more a more enlightened description, you could say. Just meaning, and I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I just mean they would relate to things in a deeper way, you could say.
Well, eh, I understood, but to prevent from sounding confusing, it isn't the house and it isn't necessarily the relationship and it isn't the money. It is because none of those things will make you happy if you're not dealing with these things internally. So if you have a bunch of fucked up perceptions, your perspective is all wrong, you don't have any understanding of where your feelings are coming from, you could have what you thought were the best of all of those categories and still be very unhappy. Not feel any
Yeah,
of the
well,
things Jason just listed.
yeah, and you can
Eh,
imagine a person with a backpack on, sort of traveling around California. I can't imagine it for myself, but you can imagine them being what we would call happy,
mhm.
right?
Free, yeah.
See, and that's where language comes in, and to me is so important because that word happiness is part of our conditioning, which pigeonholes how it pigeonholes us into certain limitations in our, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think that it really we get into, and this is the next piece of the outsourcing of happiness. When happiness depends on people, circumstances, or validation, we're giving our peace away. Happiness doesn't mean that life is always easy. It means we're no longer at war with reality necessarily. We're able to. So I think, and when you say enlightening and you're not judging, I don't hear you judging at all, but I understand why you would make the statement. And then the statement is that we're enlightened is that we understand what it is that we're dealing with. Now, I'm
Yeah,
not saying you've
yeah,
mastered it. I'm
yeah.
just saying you understand that I want the
You have
house
some
for the
awareness around
security
it.
that it provides and for the safety that it provides and for the comforts that they provide. And I find all of those give me a warm, fuzzy feeling that help with me feeling safe and free to move about because I know I can come back to a house.
Expand.
Yeah, I can expand. And now I've got a partner that I am in tune with myself and I know the things that I have to offer, the way my views, my beliefs, where they come from, and I'm on point with them and I agree with them and I feel that that's the right perspective and all that. I have a lot to offer a partner and therefore the things that we do together can be experienced as a happy feeling. I'm not dependent on her uh, performing in a certain way and fill in what you think when I say perform because I mean it in all areas. If we're counting on being happy based on what happens when our spouse wakes up the following morning and how they behave, we got a fucking problem. And relationships, whether it's with a sexual partner or a work friend or a friend from high school, all relationships are us just trying to co live in a society, in an environment, and find people who have like beliefs, like morals, like perspectives, growth mindsets, etc. We find that, and then we begin to grow together as a unit in all of those types of relationships. And in that, we understand the fulfilling nature of because we're learning and learning is huge. And if we can see somebody that we know and trust do something, it's easier for us to learn and accept that we were wrong about. So all this thing just helps with the internal part. But you take out the internal part and you will be forever. You can list all of the things that you think that would make you happy or safe or free or whatever you think. But if you haven't learned to understand that this is something that you are in control of understanding. I don't, because until you get to a deeper place, you're not really controlling it, but at least you can control understanding it at first. And, we'll get to our tool at the end of the show, but under,
You made me think of something.
okay, sure.
Can
Please
I
jump
step?
in.
All right, all right. I want to, because again, we're really ultimately trying to talk about something that's beyond complex, right? So it's really hard to do. So trying to talk about how things work in a day-to-day experience is what's important to me, right? Like how do these things operate in our day-to-day life? All right. Okay. You can look at it this way. If an individual, because of their conditioning, has been led to believe their source of happiness is found outside of them, okay? Their lived experience will be in their head, lost in thought, lost in the past, the future, chronically. And often they won't even know, we don't even know it's happening. I mean, we don't know it's happening when it's happening. We get lost in thought. So that's how it works. That's the lived experience of it. Okay. And really what that means is our life, my life needs to become more current. It needs to be presenced. I need to become more present with what I'm experiencing as regularly as I can, as regularly as I can. And for most of us, it's been decades of not being present with our experience because we don't understand the reason we're not present with our experience is because of how the body is literally mechanically operating now.
Through years of patterning.
Structural, yes, structural, patterned operating process and dynamics of our body, of the nervous system, the brain, and it's all embedded in the neurophysiology. The beliefs are embedded in the neurophysiology.
It's generational conditioning, isn't it? It's for generations we've been
Yeah,
being conditioned.
the way I see it is that this is just a natural evolutionary process. So it's just where we're headed as humans. We're headed in the direction of more sensitivity to what we're feeling and experiencing. It's necessary. The reason the difficulties exist in the world the way that they do is because on whole, we're not sensitive to what we're feeling.
Yeah, I think to the conversation we were having before we hopped on, we're really gonna be pigeonholed into all of this because no longer are these other external factors going to be necessary. We're not gonna be required to make them happen. So, and to say it in a clearer way, we aren't going to be needed for labor and creation of
Theoretically, yeah.
shit that will be then sold, that will generate money, that will create power. Where all that's going to theoretically just go away because AI is going to take care of that. And when we
Well,
are,
maybe, but
it,
you and I sit here on and everybody else on the precipice of it. Maybe that's what happens.
yeah.
Maybe not. I don't know. I
But I
mean,
mean,
it
if we're
seems
so,
inevitable.
if we're so, if we're so locked into, we are
Thinking,
right.
I
We've
would say, if we're
yeah.
locked into thinking, we are going to be more easily manipulated and
Well,
triggered.
and I was going to go down the if we're attaching to this external
Which
um,
means which
out,
means the majority of our lived experience is in thinking.
and we
They
outsource,
go hand in hand.
yeah, and we've
Yeah.
outsourced our happiness to people and circumstances and
Well,
validation, which is your job.
we've been conditioned to do that.
Yeah,
So
that's what I
that's
mean. Yeah,
yeah, I just want to it's just a clear I just want to
yeah,
clarify. So,
yes,
yeah, that's what I when I go into spaces and do the emotional intelligence workshop, that's the whole there's 9 different people with 9 different backgrounds and different appearingly different bodies. You know what I mean? But the information is the same, you
hmm
know?
yeah. We've been
Uh,
conditioned to focus on this outward stuff,
yeah,
and then if AI takes that away, so say I think that
yeah,
I am great and I was able to attract my spouse
yeah.
and I'm able to put my kids in school because I've got this great job. And
Uh-huh.
then boom, that job no longer exists, not just for you, but anybody.
Yeah.
Uh Now you don't have and money
Or
still
I have $1 billion and you have 7, but now what does it matter?
so I think that then we're having to really focus on, well, what's going to make me happy? If it's not going to be my job, if I'm not going to have
Yeah.
this affirmation and fulfillment from what I grind my ass off doing, which never should have been the focus. But now that we're no longer needed, existential crisis is going to be like glaring for everybody. I have no value. I have no worth. What am I doing? I don't,
Yeah,
so
meaning.
yeah,
Yeah,
meaning, purpose, all these things that
existential
we discuss.
meaning
Yeah.
crisis, really,
All that's going to
That's
be
the
present.
idea.
And if we can see that, whether that comes to fruition or not, but if we can understand that philosophy, then we can grasp where it is we're currently sitting, because that is going to be a good part of AI taking over everything.
And
Now,
let me tie something to, just to be poetic here for a second. This is going to be cheesy, but I'm going to do it anyway. Okay, so, all right, as with AI, all right, it's really, as with AI, what's the conversation right now? It needs power, doesn't it?
energy, yeah.
Okay, that's the same thing with our system. What the past represents for us is a lack of power in the system. It's a lack of processing power, a lack of capacity. And if we have the correct information and we know how to approach helping the body reorganize, what that does is it allows more processing capacity, more power to flow through the system. And as that occurs, what naturally flows through our system, the deepest level, who we are as human beings, what naturally flows through our system is intelligence. And our conditioning is a lack of intelligence at the deepest level to who we are. So what flows through our system is intelligence ultimately. But the system has to be organized in a way for power to flow through it. So for us with the past, this is mechanical. It's for you, for me, for everybody. The past represents a lack of power, a lack of capacity in the system. So just like AI, it's wild. I mean, I didn't even. It just sort of came to that analogy came as we're talking. Same fucking thing. So it lights me up when I say it. I can feel it. I get goosebumps in talking about it.
Mm-hmm.
How we as a species, brothers and sisters, learn how to have feel more empowered
Mm-hmm.
here walking around on this fucking planet.
Yeah, which is tough. And we talked about it. I
Amen.
think it was last show. We talked about how fucking crazy it is that we're walking around on a
Yeah.
rock
Yeah.
that's floating in
To
space,
say the
and
least.
we never even think about it. It never even crosses our mind that we are
Yeah. Yeah.
literally
Yeah. Yeah.
walking on a rock floating
That's the
around
problem.
in
We're
this.
afraid of it crossing. We're afraid of that question. And it's the very thing that offers our liberation.
So
But the thing about that question is approached in the direction of allowing more feeling into our experience. It's really paradoxical. That question is actually not approached through thinking and thinking about it and finding the right philosophy and reading the right philosopher. Who we are at the deepest level, that you don't need to read a book about that. We just have to find ourselves again, you could say.
yeah, yeah. Well, redirecting our focus, and so into this last piece, emotional ownership is going to create stability, where suppression, which is where most of us want to go, feels like control, but it actually is going to create more volatility. So owning our emotional state, it makes you predictable to yourself, versus responsibility equals awareness plus response. So responsibility creates freedom, not pressure, which is waiting, feels easier, but that keeps us stuck. So ownership feels heavy at first, but it's the only thing that's going to create movement and agency. So it's getting to these things. So at first, what sounds best to us and easiest, and we think it is control, is the suppression part. So that's where we say, I'm not even going to think about what these two guys are talking about. It's too much. It's what, fill in the fucking blank. And so you suppress it. And then you become a powder keg to explode and not regulate emotions, because you don't deal with these things. And then you wonder, where the hell did that come from? And then we live in this cycle of stuffing down that which we don't want to understand. So negative feelings, and then the window, it's like an artery that begins to constrict. We're unable to get to anything that even resembles happiness because we are so disconnected from the internal. Because all we've done, most of us since we were small children, is suppress these feelings, push this shit down. I'm not dealing with it. Again, I think it's a condition of our society, especially as men. We've been told not to do these things. We've been taught to do the opposite, which is the suppression. It is to run from it. It is to ignore it. It is to not, quote unquote, care about it. I don't care if you care about your emotions or not. Those fucking things are there and they're running the show. 1000%. Your entire life journey is being navigated by these things. So you don't have to care about it if you want. Your body cares about it. And if you care about where your journey is and where you want it to be, then you got to care about it. And, tossing this shit to the side is just not an option unless you like the feelings that you experience. And
Yeah, you called it. I like what you said. So let's just take stability. Let me just take that word for a second, okay? And here it's really mind blowing, man. So, um, okay, currently, you and I, everybody else, anybody listening to this, we are sitting in the flow of energy. That's what makes up the universe. We know that now. Okay. Right. But you could also say it's the flow of information because energy is information. So it's the flow of information. All right. And then just imagine that flow of information having different octaves like music. Right. And it's all good. It's all music. It's just the lower octaves are unstable. They're not stable, really. All right. So any system that's stable, right? It's free flowing. It has this, right? It has a balance of negative and positive, right? Like electricity flows, it requires stability, right? It requires ground, right?
yep,
Right.
in a circuit.
So for us, that starts with the body. So the body is the instrument for us. And the more you understand that, the more we approach it, the more we understand what to do, what it's I really want to say what practices to engage in, but it's really about if we know how to relax, then that encourages the body to rebalance, which is naturally rebalancing the negative and positive dynamics in the system. And then you could say, as that occurs, it gives that body access to higher information, higher intelligence, right?
Yep.
So the past for us, essentially at the deepest level, just means that there's a body that is shaped in a way that is only really aware of lower octaves. I know it sounds wild. It's just, it's just the
I,
truth of.
well, and I think, and if I fuck this analogy up, by all means, correct me. But I think we can, a layman way to say that is just when I go to work a new job, I don't know how to do what the manager knows how to do or his manager or the CEO. I don't know what any of those people know how to do. And I can't walk in and think I can take that guy's job because that's silly. And if you think that, you're silly. and it's why you're not the CEO yet. You there's so
Yeah,
much
yeah.
you got to learn what the first guy does and the second guy does and the third guy does before you can become the fourth guy.
Experience,
Yeah, you've got to have
experience.
experience.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what you're saying. And we can go to the grave without experiencing any of this. And if we look back generationally, we can see our ancestors did it. So it's not that you can't go from cradle to grave and never spend time on these things. But you, you can also look back and think grandparent, great grandparent was always on a different, they were on some different shit. And they didn't have as much conditioning as we have. And so it's a little hard to see exactly, because grandma may have seemed happy uh, catering to grandpa. I don't know. But today's female's not going to feel happy catering to male. It's not going to happen. But they didn't never even, my grandfather, I'm thinking about my grandfather right now. If I had talked to him about emotions, he'd just slap me and say, "What the fuck is wrong with you? I don't talk about my emotions." And, if you see me smile, you'll know how I feel. Like, if you see me scowl, you know how I feel. And he didn't have emotional regulation, I think. And I think that it was, that man dealt with some hard life. And um, I think that he was not emotionally regulated at all. He had a great life. I think he had an amazing life as far as the external goes. I think he was impactful to our society. Um, I'm proud to be his grandson, but I don't think that's what the whole Senet's what we're doing here. I don't think that that's the key. And they were so much more building a society starting in the early 1900s. They were still building what we're currently living in with no understanding of what they were doing. And I'm sure we're doing the same thing. We're building the society for uh, the next generations. We don't see where it's headed. Um,
We're becoming more sensitive.
we've definitely become more sensitive. Again, my grandfather would be like, "What are we talking about emotions right now?" And I don't think it's that's I think that gets tossed into the arena with woke and other negative terms that have become politicized.
Let me do this. We're getting more sensitive to the truth of our own experience.
There we go.
We're getting
Because
more sensitive to
we're not sissies.
the
We're
truth
not
of the truth of where actual power lies here in our experience as human beings. Human beings forever have been contending with this world and the way that it is forever. And it's
much more so.
confusing.
Yeah,
Yeah.
much more so than we do today. Like I'm not
Yeah.
worried about a tiger attacking me when I walk out the door today. I'm not worried about it. Deep down in there somewhere, it's worried. But there was a time when a human would walk out of their dwelling, if that was just a rock that they were living under or whatever, and have to worry about that. My grandfather, going through the Depression, knew he had to worry about food supply and shelter. And so he wasn't as disconnected from those realities as I think that I am. I know my positioning is very fortunate, but I don't think that I face homelessness or
I
food
got you.
scarcity.
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
much more part of the instinctual in us. They were hooked into that, whereas now we're forced to deal more with these feel like who we
Well,
are.
there's
And
a rule, sort of what you're saying. So at the deepest level, for a human being to move into a greater understanding of themselves, deeper understanding of themselves and the nature of reality, typically throughout time or throughout the last 5,000, I don't know, 5,000 years or so, has included pain and suffering that has caused this deeper question to emerge, right? Um, and so it sort of still operates that way. If a human at the deepest level, I'll say, anyway, at the deepest level, comfort, it is fine. It supports a material life. That's fine. It's just there's something deeper going on. That's just the way that it works. And so now, with all the pressure that's currently in our environment, in the atmosphere, all this pressure, it will naturally cause an individual to be confronted with a deeper layer of themselves. And that often, or the way that it works really, is that uh, everything becomes more intense. Feelings are more intense. The past is more active. They're more reactive.
yeah, I
We
think,
are more reactive.
sorry, I think kind of what I was describing is the hierarchy of needs. When we have a hierarchy of needs, and when they're met, we can go to the next level. When they're
Hmm.
not, we've just got to focus on that level. And for so long, we were focused on food and shelter because obviously huge in the hierarchy of needs. You got to have those. We've found ourselves now as a society, again, in the United States. I'm not saying that in other societies around the world that this is always going to apply, but in the US, we've really taken care of those base needs, human needs. And so now we've gotten into, we got to face these feelings and shit because we're not, we know now that it's not an unease because of food scarcity or an unease of shelter scarcity or that a tiger's going to get us when we walk out the door. And I know that people in America deal with food scarcity and shelter needs. Not saying that's not the case. Not even saying that you're listening to this podcast not dealing with those things. I'm just saying they can be taken care of relatively quickly. And when we're still facing this, why do I have all this fucking pressure? Why do I feel these uneasy on the inside and blah, blah, blah. So I want to, I think that puts a bow on it that are now dealing with and must face them, because I think when we hear the word sensitive, that's what scares men about dealings with their feelings. And it is that you're weaker by doing so. And I just can't say it enough that no, you're actually stronger and more grounded and able to handle more scenarios, which gives you more power really to navigate this life and all the crazy shit that the world is going to throw at this rock that we're floating on is going to throw at us. And, we can stop thinking about it as much as we want, but it's very real, and tornadoes are real. Flooding is real. Hurricanes are real. So we have to be understanding of that. And so I'll go into our tool now, and our practical tool for this week is going to be the responsibility audit. And it's a simple exercise. I'm going to put all these tools, in the description section of the podcast. So they're usually just a couple, 3 questions that we're going to sit down and ask ourselves. And then that'll help kind of go through it. And you won't have to write things down if you're driving, listening, or whatever. So what am I currently unhappy about? So an example, a strained relationship, work stress, financial pressure, feeling disconnected, lack of motivation. What part of this is outside of my control? So is it other people's behavior that are driving it? Past decisions that I've made, economic conditions that I find myself in, timing, outcomes that you can't force? Is that where it's coming from? And then what part of this is within my control right now? So how am I going to respond? Setting or enforcing a boundary, adjusting expectations, taking small action, choosing where to place the attention. You don't have to fix everything. You just need to own your next move. So, and that's what I think Jason was kind of saying. And as we do this, we will begin to build this blocks and say, oh shit, wow. And in my book, I talk about changing my perspective being such a massive thing, and how it allowed me to then see answers that had been sitting around me to questions that I had that were like really fucking my life up. Answers were laying right in front of me, but because I was just looking at things in a negative way, I was only finding the negative solutions. I was not finding the correct positive things to attack, because I was looking at myself as some form of victim. My God, look where I lay. Oh, this is all poor me. Instead of thinking, what can I do to change this? And so for me to walk through this, what am I currently unhappy about? And let's say it's a financial pressure. So how am I going to get this bill paid? And what part of this is outside of my control? How much the bill cost? It's outside of my control. Where I currently am, so I have to worry about this because I don't have enough built up in my bank account. And now 3 is what can I do in this moment to control that? And it's not, well, I can go out and rob a bank. Sure, that's probably going to have some consequences after. So you may be able to pay your NES bill, your electric bill today, but you're not going to have an electric bill tomorrow because you have to go to jail for robbing the bank. So what can I do now? Maybe change my patterns instead of spending my time playing a game or watching a game. I begin to focus on how I could make more money. That's the type of thing we're saying. And you can't change this shit right away. Like, it's not something you're gonna be able to find, you're gonna see and say, oh shit, I'll just change that right away. Why am I unhappy? Why do I get so angry in a scenario like this? Is a little more realistic. My fiance says to me, uh, something that triggers a fear in me, that she's threatening to leave, or she's not going to support me or all this external bullshit. If that triggers something in me and I don't understand that that comes from my childhood when, I didn't have a dad and he was gone and all this shit, and I can't make that connection, then that's going to blow up into this whole thing. But if I can stop and say, my significant other didn't say anything of the sort, they just said they didn't feel like going to the grocery store right now. And I need to back down and accept that that doesn't mean she doesn't love me and that she's going to leave me. It just means that she can't go to the store. And even though I need her to go to the store because I'm working, she can't do it. And that's not an attack on me. That's not an attack on my emotions. That's not any of these things. That's my inability to see what is really happening in front of me right now, being present to your point earlier. Um, so I think that that is the type of thing we could utilize this tool for. So, in conclusion, responsibility doesn't mean that you caused everything in life. It doesn't mean that you have to handle everything alone. It means that recognizing that while you can't control what happened to you, you do get to decide how much power it has over you today and every other day. Happiness isn't passive, it isn't something that we arrive at once everything is perfect. It starts when we stop handling a piece over to circumstances, people, or outcomes that we can't control. We're not responsible for our trauma, but we are responsible for our healing. Taking responsibility doesn't make life easier, it makes it honest. And honesty is where the real freedom starts. I think that we don't need to make big changes right away. We can end up making big changes, but it's one step at a time. So it's not just it's not trying to have clarity for the whole thing. Like, where do I want to end up necessarily? We do set goals. We'll talk about it another time. But where do I want to? It's just what can I do right this second? How can I change? What little change can I take today? So it, it keeps from having the I got to eat the whole elephant. You just got to take a bite. You just got to take a bite, chew it up, swallow it. And once you've swallowed it, then you take another bite. And you just keep doing that. So hopefully this resonates with you guys. And as always, we thank you for giving us your time, which is the most valuable asset. And until next time, stay in the fight. This world's a better place with you in it.